Have you ever wondered why some people seem to learn faster, remember more, and stay laser-focused, while others struggle to keep up? The answer isn't luck or talent. It's about understanding how the brain actually works. For decades, scientists have studied the brain's hidden rules, and what they've found can change everything about the way you live and learn. In his groundbreaking book, Brain Rules, molecular biologist John Medina reveals 12 science-backed principles that explain how our brains function best. These aren't just theories. They're practical secrets you can apply today to boost memory, increase focus, and unlock creativity. In this video, we're going to break down all 12 rules in a simple, engaging way so you can finally make your brain work for you, not against you. And trust me, you'll be surprised by what really matters most when it comes to unlocking your full potential. Rule 1. Exercise boosts brain power. When most people think about exercise, they imagine toned muscles, strong lungs, or maybe fitting into smaller clothes. But what if I told you that the single best reason to exercise has nothing to do with your body and everything to do with your brain? Science shows that physical activity doesn't just make you healthier, it literally makes your brain function better. Researchers have discovered that every time you move, your heart pumps more oxygen-rich blood into your brain. That extra oxygen fuels your neurons, helping them fire faster and more efficiently. Even more powerful, exercise stimulates the production of chemicals called growth factors, which act like fertilizer for your brain cells, encouraging them to grow stronger connections. Think about it this way. Imagine your brain as a city. The roads are your neural pathways, and your thoughts are cars traveling on those roads. Exercise is like upgrading dirt roads into smooth highways, making traffic flow faster and more smoothly. This means better memory, sharper focus, and even faster problem solving. And here's the surprising part. You don't need to become a marathon runner to get these benefits. Simple activities like brisk walking, cycling, or even dancing for 20 minutes a day can trigger massive improvements in brain performance. In fact, John Medina points out that our ancestors were constantly on the move. The human brain didn't evolve while sitting in an office chair. It evolved while walking an average of 12 miles a day, hunting and gathering. That constant movement shaped the way our brains developed, and today, when we sit still for hours, we're going against our biology. No wonder so many of us feel sluggish or struggle to concentrate. It's because our brains are craving movement, and the evidence keeps stacking up. One famous study showed that school children who had daily physical education performed better in reading and math than kids who didn't. Another experiment at Naperville Central High School in Illinois became legendary. After introducing a program that combined exercise with learning, their students ended up scoring among the top in the world in science and math, even beating countries like Singapore. Why? Because their brains were being primed for learning through movement. The same principle applies to adults. NASA has studied how astronauts lose not only muscle mass, but also mental sharpness when they spend too much time without movement in space. On Earth, professionals who exercise regularly show sharper memory, better creativity, and faster problem-solving at work. Companies like Google and Apple encourage walking meetings for this very reason. They know movement sparks new ideas. Studies even show that regular exercise can slow down age-related decline. Older adults who stay active consistently outperform their sedentary peers in memory tests, problem-solving, and even creativity. It's like giving your brain a natural anti-aging treatment, without pills or expensive supplements. And if you're younger, Exercise doesn't just protect your future brain, it supercharges your current one. College students who exercise regularly score higher on exams. Kids who run around before class actually learn faster than those who sit still all day. The takeaway is simple. If you want to unlock the full power of your brain, you can't ignore your body. Movement is not optional. It's essential. The more you move, the better your brain works. So, the next time you're feeling foggy or distracted, don't just reach for another cup of coffee. Instead, try getting up and moving, even if it's just a quick walk around the block. Your brain will thank you immediately. Rule 2. Survival shaped the brain. If you really want to understand how the brain works, you need to go back in time, way back. The human brain didn't evolve in air-conditioned offices, coffee shops, or classrooms. It evolved in the wild, where survival was the only priority. John Medina explains that the brain we carry today is essentially the same brain our ancestors used tens of thousands of years ago to hunt, gather, and stay alive. And here's the fascinating part. Everything about the way our brain learns, remembers, and solves problems is still wired for survival. Think about what survival demanded. Early humans had to constantly pay attention to threats in their environment, like predators, poisonous plants, or rival tribes. They had to remember where food and water sources were located. They had to cooperate in groups to protect one another. These challenges shaped the brain into a powerful survival machine, capable of incredible pattern recognition, memory, and adaptability. But here's the catch. Our modern lives don't always match the environment our brains were designed for. For example, back in the wild, movement and awareness were constant. Sitting still for hours would have been dangerous. Yet today, most of us spend long stretches sitting at desks or staring at screens. No wonder we feel restless or unfocused. Our brains are craving stimulation that mimics survival conditions. Another example is memory. In the past, remembering where you saw ripe fruit or the path back to camp could mean the difference between life and death. That's why the brain naturally remembers emotionally charged events better than boring, routine ones. In modern times, this explains why you might forget an office meeting but never forget the time you were in a car accident. Here's something even more powerful. Survival made the brain social. Alone, humans were vulnerable. But in groups, we thrived. That's why the brain is wired to connect, empathize, and collaborate. Even today, teamwork triggers brain chemistry that boosts learning and problem solving. When we share ideas, tell stories, or support one another, we're using ancient survival wiring. But survival wiring also has its downsides. Stress, for example, was originally useful. If a predator jumped out, your stress response gave you energy to fight or run. But in today's world, where stress often comes from emails, deadlines, and bills, the brain still reacts as if it's facing a tiger. Over time, this survival response can actually hurt learning, memory, and even health. That's why chronic stress is one of the biggest enemies of brain performance. It's a survival tool that no longer fits modern life. One fascinating study showed that students performed better on problem-solving tasks when they were given challenges that felt real and urgent, almost like survival puzzles. Compare that to endless memorization of abstract facts, and the difference is clear. The brain learns best when the task feels meaningful. Schools that integrate storytelling, hands-on projects, or real-world problem-solving often see huge jumps in student engagement and memory retention. The workplace is no different. Companies that create collaborative environments, where people share goals and support one another, are tapping into survival wiring. Humans are not built to thrive in isolation. That's why remote workers often report higher stress unless they find ways to connect socially. It's not weakness, it's biology. So what's the takeaway? If we want to use our brains to their full potential, we need to respect the way they were shaped. That means designing our lives and even our schools and workplaces to align with survival principles. Movement, social interaction, emotional learning, and meaningful problem-solving aren't luxuries. They're essential brain fuel. The closer we live to the conditions our brains evolved for, the better we think, learn, and thrive. Rule 3. Every brain is wired differently. One of the most amazing things about the human brain is that no two brains are exactly the same. Even identical twins, who share the same DNA, develop different neural pathways based on their unique experiences. John Medina calls this the individuality rule, and it's one of the reasons why people learn, remember, and even perceive the world so differently. Think about it like this. Your brain is like a fingerprint. It carries a unique pattern that nobody else has. The reason is simple. Every moment of your life shapes it. The places you've lived, the people you've met, the books you've read, even the meals you've eaten, all of these leave tiny imprints on your brain's wiring. That's why two students sitting in the same classroom, listening to the same teacher, can walk away with completely different understandings of the same lesson. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Brain scans show that when two people think about the same object, like an apple, completely different patterns light up in their brains. That's because each person connects the idea of apple to their own memories and experiences. Maybe childhood lunches, maybe a family orchard, or maybe the first time they baked a pie. The brain is not a machine that copies information the same way every time. It's more like a living ecosystem, constantly reshaping itself around your personal experiences. This has powerful implications for education and learning. Traditional. Classrooms often treat students as if they all process information the same way. One-size-fits-all lectures, tests, and curriculums. But the reality is, some students learn better by seeing visuals, others by listening, and others by doing hands-on activities. Medina argues that ignoring these differences is like trying to fit every child into the same mold, which leaves many frustrated and disengaged. The same is true in the workplace. Two employees might receive the same instructions, but one thrives with step-by-step guidance while the other prefers freedom to experiment. Understanding these differences doesn't just make learning easier, it makes teams stronger. Smart leaders and teachers design environments that honor individuality instead of fighting it. Here's a practical takeaway. When you're trying to learn something new, don't assume the method that works for someone else will work for you. Experiment. Try reading, writing, drawing, speaking, or teaching the concept to another person. Notice which method sticks best. That's your brain's personal wiring showing you the fastest route to memory. Even more inspiring is the idea of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt. Just because your brain is wired in a certain way now doesn't mean it will stay that way forever. With practice, learning, and experience, your brain literally rewires itself. A shy person can learn social skills, a struggling student can become a master at math, and someone who feels bad at remembering names can actually train their brain to get better at it. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "I'm just not wired for this," remember, that's only half true. Your wiring is unique. Yes, but it's also flexible. Every challenge, every new skill, every mistake you learn from is sculpting your brain into something new. And that's the real secret of individuality. Your brain is yours alone, and it's still being written every day. Rule 4. We don't pay attention to boring things. Here's the truth about the brain. It hates boring. In fact, if something doesn't catch your attention, your brain simply won't process it. That means no matter how important the information might be, if it's delivered in a dull way, it's as if it never happened. John Medina emphasizes this rule with one simple phrase: the brain doesn't pay attention to boring things. Think about your own life. How many times have you sat through a long, dull lecture or meeting, only to realize afterward that you remembered almost nothing? On the other hand, you probably have crystal clear memories of exciting, funny, or dramatic moments, even if they happened years ago. That's because attention acts like a filter. Your brain decides what's worth noticing and what's worth ignoring, and only the interesting stuff makes it through. So, what actually grabs the brain's attention? First, emotion. The brain is wired to lock onto things that spark feelings, whether it's laughter, fear, surprise, or even curiosity. That's why good teachers tell stories, comedians hold our attention, and great movies keep us hooked for hours. Stories, in particular, are like super fuel for the brain. They combine emotion, imagery, and meaning in a way that makes information stick. Second, novelty. The brain is naturally drawn to the unexpected. When something breaks the pattern, like a sudden sound, a strange fact, or a surprising twist, your brain lights up. That's why marketers use shocking headlines, why teachers add unusual demonstrations, and why speakers often start with a surprising question. Novelty is like a mental alarm bell. It says, "Hey, this matters. Pay attention." Third, relevance. If something connects directly to your life or goals, your brain perks up. This explains why a student might ignore a math formula in class, but later, when they realize it helps them calculate money or time in real life, suddenly find it interesting. Relevance transforms abstract information into something meaningful, and the brain remembers what matters. But here's the problem. Much of modern education and communication ignores these principles. Schools often expect students to sit still for long stretches, absorbing information that feels disconnected from their lives. Workplaces hold endless meetings that drag on with data dumps and PowerPoint slides. In both cases, the brain is zoning out, not tuning in. No wonder we forget so much of what we hear. The good news? We can hack attention. Teachers who tell engaging stories, leaders who mix humor into presentations, and even students who turn study sessions into games all trigger the brain's natural attention system. Medina suggests breaking up learning into chunks, adding stories, asking questions, and using visuals. These aren't gimmicks, they're brain science. Think of it like feeding your brain snacks instead of forcing it to swallow a giant meal. Small, engaging bursts of information keep the brain awake, while long, monotonous sessions make it shut down. That's why TED Talks are short, why YouTube thrives on snappy content, and why the best communicators always leave people wanting more. The takeaway is simple. If you want someone to learn, remember, or care, you can't afford to be boring. Your brain, and everyone else's, just won't allow it. Instead, you need to spark emotion, surprise the mind, and connect the dots to real life. Because at the end of the day, attention is the gatekeeper of memory. If you can't capture attention, nothing else matters. Rule 5. Repeat to remember. Here's a simple truth about memory. If you don't repeat something, you'll forget it. Our brains are not designed to hold on to every piece of information forever. Instead, the brain filters out what it thinks isn't important and keeps what it sees as valuable. John Medina explains this with Rule 5. Repeat to remember. Think about the last time you tried to remember someone's name at a party. You hear it once, maybe even twice, but an hour later it's gone. Why? Because you didn't repeat it enough times for your brain to lock it in. Memory isn't about hearing or seeing something once. It's about coming back to it again and again until the brain decides, okay, this is worth keeping. Scientists call this spaced repetition. It means reviewing information at intervals, over time, rather than cramming it all at once. Cramming might help you remember something for a test tomorrow, but you'll likely forget it the next week. Spaced repetition, on the other hand, strengthens the memory each time you revisit it, almost like adding extra layers of glue. That's why learning apps like Duolingo or flashcard systems like Anki work so well. They're built on the science of spacing out review sessions. The process is like building a path through the woods. The first time you walk it, the trail is faint and easy to lose. But the more times you walk the same path, the clearer and stronger it becomes. Eventually, it turns into a solid road that your brain can travel down effortlessly. Memory works the same way. The more you repeat, the easier recall becomes. This rule doesn't just apply to school or studying. Think about musicians, athletes, or actors. They don't master their skills in a single practice session. They drill the same notes, moves, or lines hundreds of times until they become second nature. That's not just discipline. That's brain science in action. Here's where it gets interesting. Repetition works best when it's meaningful. Mindlessly repeating something doesn't help much. The brain remembers better when repetition is tied to context, emotion, or a personal connection. For example, if you're trying to learn a new word in a foreign language, it helps to use it in a funny sentence or connect it to an image in your life. The repetition sticks because it feels alive, not robotic. One powerful way to use this rule is through teaching. When you explain something you've learned to someone else, you're not just repeating it, you're processing it at a deeper level. Teaching forces your brain to recall, organize, and communicate information, which strengthens the memory far more than passive review. Medina even suggests designing schools and workplaces around this principle. Instead of long lectures or one-time training sessions, imagine if information was broken into short lessons that were revisited over days or weeks. Students and employees wouldn't just cram, they'd actually remember. The takeaway is clear. If you want to remember something, long-term, don't rely on a single exposure. Use repetition, spaced over time, tied to meaning, and reinforced by practice. Because memory isn't built in one moment. It's built in layers, each one added by coming back again and again. Repeat to remember. That's the brain's golden Waini. Rule 6. Remember to repeat. If Rule 5 taught us that repetition strengthens memory, Rule 6 is the flip side of the coin. Remember to repeat. It's not enough to review information. You need to do it at the right time. John Medina explains that memory is like a slippery slope. If you don't revisit information soon after learning it, your brain starts erasing it. Here's the science. Psychologists have studied something called the forgetting curve for over a century. Right after you learn something new, your memory of it drops dramatically within the first 24 hours. Without reinforcement, you can lose up to 80% of the information in just a couple of days. But if you review it strategically, say, one day later, then a week later, then a month later, the memory becomes stronger each time. The key isn't just repeating, but repeating before the brain deletes. Think about cramming for a test. You stay up all night, pack your brain full of facts, and maybe do well the next day. But ask you about the same material a week later, and it's gone. That's because cramming ignores the forgetting curve. The brain isn't built to store information in giant chunks. It's built to reinforce knowledge over time. Now imagine a different approach. You learn a concept in class on Monday, review it for a few minutes on Tuesday, revisit it again on Friday, and then check back in the following week. Each time you recall it, you're pulling the memory out of storage and strengthening it like a muscle. That's how you build long-term memory. This rule is why great teachers and coaches use consistent review cycles. For example, music instructors don't let students play a piece once and move on. They schedule practice, review past pieces, and build layers of skill. The same applies to athletes running drills or pilots using flight simulators. They're not just practicing. They're strategically repeating at intervals that strengthen memory. And here's the powerful part. This doesn't just apply to facts or skills. It applies to habits too. If you're trying to build a new routine, like exercising, meditating, or journaling, you need to remember to repeat. Doing it once or twice won't stick, but if you revisit the habit consistently at planned intervals, it carves a groove into your brain, making it automatic. One practical tool for this is the spaced repetition system, used in apps like Anki or Quizlet. These apps remind you to review information right before you're about to forget it, perfectly syncing with the forgetting curve. It's like having a personal trainer for your brain, making sure you remember at the optimal moment. The takeaway is this: memory is a process, not an event. If you want to truly learn something, don't just repeat it randomly. You have to remember to repeat, at the right times, in the right ways, before the brain lets go. That's how knowledge becomes permanent, skills become automatic, and habits become second nature. Rule 7. Sleep well, think well. Imagine this. You're preparing for an important presentation or exam. You've got a choice: stay up all night cramming or get a solid 7-8 hours of sleep. Which do you pick? Most people choose to push through, sacrificing rest. But here's the catch. By skipping sleep, you're actually sabotaging your brain's ability to perform at its best. John Medina, in Brain Rules, explains that sleep isn't just rest. It's an active process where your brain literally rewires itself. During deep sleep, your brain files away the day's experiences, sorts through memories, and strengthens the neural connections that help you recall and apply what you've learned. Think of it as your brain's overnight filing system. Without it, your mental desk becomes cluttered and chaotic. In fact, studies show that sleep deprivation can impair memory, decision-making, creativity, and even emotional control. One famous study compared sleep-deprived participants to those who were legally drunk. Their reaction times and problem-solving abilities were almost identical. In other words, pulling an all-nighter makes you as effective as trying to do calculus. After 3 shots of tequila, and here's the kicker, sleep also fuels creativity. REM sleep, the dream phase, is like a brainstorming session in your brain. It combines ideas, connects patterns, and sparks insights that you'd never think of when awake. That's why so many inventors, writers, and scientists report breakthroughs after a good night's sleep, or even a nap. So how can you apply this brain rule? Start treating sleep as non-negotiable. Aim for 7 to 8 hours a night. Keep a consistent schedule, dim the lights before bed, and ditch the late-night scrolling. If you need an extra boost, even a 20-minute power nap can recharge focus and memory. The bottom line? If you want to think sharper, remember more, and unlock your creative potential, don't burn the midnight oil. Instead, honor your brain's natural need for rest. Sleep well, and you'll truly think well. Rule 8. Stress down, learn up. Picture this. You're sitting in class or at work trying to absorb new information, but in the back of your mind, you're worried about bills, deadlines, or maybe a tough conversation you just had. Suddenly, no matter how hard you try, the lesson just doesn't stick. Why? Because stress hijacks the brain. John Medina makes it clear. Our brains are not built to learn effectively under chronic stress. A little stress in short bursts can sharpen focus, like a shot of adrenaline before a big game. But ongoing stress, day after day, floods your system with cortisol. That hormone damages the hippocampus, the brain's memory headquarters. Imagine trying to write notes on a chalkboard that keeps getting wiped clean. That's what stress does to memory. Worse, stress also shrinks attention span and kills creativity. Think about it. Have you ever tried solving a complex problem while you were panicking? It feels impossible because the brain is too busy scanning for threats to do anything else. And yet, here's the powerful insight. When stress goes down, learning goes up. Environments that feel safe, supportive, and encouraging allow the brain to relax, focus, and thrive. That's why some of the most innovative workplaces and schools now emphasize psychological safety, spaces where mistakes are treated as part of growth, not as punishable failures. So how can you apply this brain rule in your own life? Start with small habits. Practice deep breathing or meditation to calm your nervous system. Take breaks instead of grinding endlessly. Exercise regularly. It's nature's stress reliever. And surround yourself with people who lift you up rather than tear you down. Even laughter with a friend can reset your brain chemistry. The lesson here is simple but profound. If you want your brain to learn, grow, and perform at its peak, you must lower the stress load. Because a stressed brain is a distracted brain, but a calm brain is a powerful one. Rule 9. Stimulate more senses. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're walking into a bakery. You don't just see the golden loaves lined up. You smell the fresh bread. You hear the crunch as someone slices into it. Maybe you even feel the warmth when you hold a piece in your hands. That's not just a pleasant experience. It's also how your brain learns best. According to brain rules, the more senses you involve, the stronger and more lasting your memory becomes. Think of your brain like a filing cabinet. If you store information through just one sense, say, listening, it's like putting a paper in one folder. But if you involve sight, sound, touch, maybe even smell, it's like making multiple copies and filing them in several places. When you need the memory later, you've got more ways to retrieve it. This is why great teachers, presenters, and storytellers often combine visuals, audio, and hands-on experiences. A diagram alone might fade from memory, but if you see the picture, hear the explanation, and engage with an example, your brain locks it in. Even in everyday life, multi-sensory input matters. Cooking with friends, for example, isn't just about following a recipe. It's about the sights, sounds, smells, textures, and tastes all working together to reinforce the experience. That's why you remember it so clearly, compared to, say, just reading about food in a textbook. So how can you use this brain rule? If you're studying, don't just read silently. Say the words out loud. draw sketches, or teach the concept to someone else. If you're giving a presentation, add visuals, stories, and even physical props. The more sensory channels you activate, the more powerful your message becomes. Bottom line, a one-sense approach is like watching life in black and white. But when you stimulate more senses, your brain processes in full color, making learning richer, stronger, and unforgettable. Rule 10. Vision trumps all other senses. Let me ask you this. If I describe a scene to you in words, how much will you remember tomorrow? Now, what if I show you a picture of that same scene? Chances are, the image will stick far longer than the words. That's no coincidence. Your brain is wired for vision. John Medina points out that vision dominates all other senses. In fact, we process visual information 60,000 times faster than text. Think about that. A single glance at a photo can communicate what paragraphs of writing might struggle to explain. That's why we say things like, "I see what you mean." Our brains are visual machines. Here's a powerful example. If you hear a piece of information, you'll probably remember about 10% of it 3 days later. But if you pair that same information with a relevant image, recall skyrockets to 65%. That's the brain rule in action. This has huge implications for how we teach, learn, and communicate. Too often, we rely on text-heavy slides, endless notes, or long lectures. But our brains crave images. Stories become more powerful with vivid mental pictures. Lessons stick when they're paired with graphics, diagrams, or even simple sketches. And it's not just about memory. Vision also sparks emotion. A photograph can move us to tears, inspire action, or change the way we see the world. Words alone rarely have the same instant impact. So, how can you apply this rule? Next time you're studying, doodle what you're learning, or find images that represent the concept. If you're giving a presentation, cut down the text and add visuals that bring your points to life. And even in daily conversations, use metaphors and descriptions that paint pictures in people's minds. Here's the truth. Your brain doesn't just like visuals. It lives on them. If you want to remember, persuade, or inspire, put your message into pictures. Because when vision speaks, the brain listens. Rule 11. Male and female brains are different. Here's a fascinating question. Do men and women think differently? Science says yes, but probably not in the way you imagine. According to brain rules, male and female brains are built from the same basic parts, but hormones, structures, and processing styles create subtle but meaningful differences. For example, research shows that on average, men have a slightly larger amygdala, the brain's emotion center, while women often show more cross-communication between the left and right hemispheres. What does this mean in real life? Men may be more prone to responding with a fight or flight reaction under stress, while women may engage more in emotion-based problem-solving or communication. It's also been found that women are generally better at remembering emotional details, while men may focus more on the big picture. That's why after a shared event, one partner might recall the exact words spoken, while the other remembers the overall theme. Neither is better. They're just different ways of processing information. But here's the key point, John. Medina emphasizes, these differences are averages, not rules. They don't define every individual. The real takeaway isn't that one brain is stronger than the other. It's that diversity of thought makes teams, families, and workplaces stronger. When male and female perspectives combine, problem-solving becomes richer and more creative. So how can you apply this insight? First, recognize that people around you may approach challenges differently based on how their brains are wired. Instead of seeing this as conflict, see it as complement. In group projects, welcome a range of viewpoints. In relationships, appreciate that memory, communication, or stress responses may differ, and that's okay. The brain rule is clear. Male and female brains are not identical, but they are equal in power. Understanding and valuing those differences isn't just about fairness. It's about unlocking the full potential of human intelligence. Rule 12. We are powerful natural explorers. Think about a baby. From the moment they open their eyes, they're experimenting, testing, and exploring the world around them. Drop a spoon, watch it fall, push a button, hear a sound, touch something new. Learn instantly whether it's soft, rough, hot, or cold. Babies are tiny scientists, constantly running experiments to figure out how the world works. John Medina calls this our most powerful brain rule. Humans are natural-born explorers. Curiosity isn't something we learn, it's something we're born with. Our brains are wired to ask questions, to test ideas, and to seek patterns. This instinct is what drove humanity to discover fire, invent the wheel, build airplanes, and even explore outer space. The challenge is that somewhere along the way, in school or in life, we often lose touch with that fearless curiosity. Instead of asking why or what if, we start worrying about being wrong, about failing, about not looking smart. But the truth is, exploration and mistakes are essential for learning. Every breakthrough in history, from Thomas Edison's light bulb to SpaceX rockets, was built on countless failed experiments that revealed something new. So how can you apply this rule in your own life? Start by embracing curiosity again. Ask more questions, even if they seem simple. Try new hobbies, read outside your comfort zone, or experiment with creative projects where failure is part of the fun. And if you're leading a team or raising kids, encourage exploration by creating a safe space for trial and error. Your brain isn't designed to sit passively. It's designed to engage, to wonder, to test, and to grow. The more you feed your natural explorer, the sharper, more adaptable, and more creative your mind becomes. The rule is simple. Curiosity isn't childlike. It's the core of being human. The more we explore, the more alive our brains become. We've just traveled through John Medina's Brain Rules, 12 science-backed secrets that reveal how your mind really works. From the way exercise fuels brain power, to the magic of sleep, and memory to the role of curiosity and exploration, each rule shows us that the brain isn't fixed, it's adaptable. It's alive. Think about what this means. Your brain is not just a machine you're stuck with. It's a living, dynamic organ that can grow stronger with the right habits. Sleep more, stress less, move your body, engage your senses, and never stop asking questions. These aren't just nice ideas. They're proven pathways to unlocking your full potential. The bigger message? We often live and learn in ways that go against how the brain naturally works. Schools cram without breaks. Workplaces overload with stress. We drown in text-heavy slides when our brains crave visuals. But when we align with these rules, when we design our lives to match how our brains actually function, we unlock focus, memory, creativity, and joy. So here's my challenge for you. Don't just listen to these 12 brain rules. Pick one rule, just one, that resonates most with you right now, and start applying it today. small shifts create big change. Imagine if you lived with these principles at the center of your daily life. Imagine the focus, the energy, the creativity you'd unleash. That's the gift of understanding your brain. It gives you the tools to become the very best version of yourself. If this video opened your eyes, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use a brain boost today. Because the more people who understand these rules, the more powerful and more human our world becomes. Your brain is extraordinary. Now it's your turn to unlock it.